The November rain drummed against the windows of the Manhattan law office, creating rivulets that distorted the city lights below. Sarah Mitchell sat across from her father's attorney, her hands folded tightly in her lap, knuckles white from the pressure. The mahogany desk between them seemed to stretch for miles, laden with documents that would change everything. "Your father's estate is substantial," Mr. Brennan said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. His voice carried the weight of 30 years in estate law. "The total value, including the real estate holdings, investment portfolio, and the company shares, comes to approximately $47 million. Sarah felt the number wash over her like ice water. She'd known her father was wealthy. Richard Mitchell had built his construction empire from nothing, starting with a single bulldozer and a loan he could barely afford. But hearing the actual figure made her stomach churn. Not because of greed, but because she knew what was coming next. "However," Brennan continued, and Sarah braced herself, "there are some complications." The door to the conference room burst open without warning. Derek Mitchell strode in, his $1,000 suit immaculate despite the rain outside. Sarah's older brother had always known how to make an entrance. At 38, he carried himself with the arrogance of someone who'd never heard the word no, at least not from their father. "Sorry I'm late," Derek said, though his tone suggested he wasn't sorry at all. He dropped into the leather chair beside Sarah without acknowledging her presence. "Traffic was murder, so Brennan, let's cut to the chase. How much did the old man leave me?" Sarah watched her brother's performance with a mixture of disgust and pity. Even now, even after everything, he couldn't drop the act. The golden boy, the chosen son, the one who could do no wrong in Richard Mitchell's eyes. Except their father was gone now, and the truth had a way of surfacing when the one keeping it buried was 6 feet underground. "Mr. Mitchell," Brennan said carefully, "perhaps we should wait until—" "No need to wait," Derek interrupted, checking his Rolex. "I've got a meeting with some investors in an hour. Just give me the breakdown. I assume Dad left me controlling interest in Mitchell Construction, the estate in the Hamptons, and the majority of the liquid assets. Sarah can have Mom's jewelry and maybe the cabin upstate. That should be more than enough for her lifestyle." The way he said lifestyle made Sarah's jaw clench. As if 20 years of caring for their ailing mother while Derek played businessman with their father's money was something shameful. As if her small apartment in Queens and her job as a social worker were beneath the Mitchell name. "Actually," Brennan said, sliding a document across the desk, "your father's will contains some specific provisions that might surprise you both." Derek snatched the paper before Sarah could react, his eyes scanning the legal text with increasing speed. She watched the color drain from his face, then rush back in a wave of red that crept up from his collar. "This is a joke," he said flatly. "This has to be a mistake. I assure you, Mr. Mitchell, there is no mistake. Your father was very clear in his intentions. He revised this will 6 months ago, and I personally witnessed his signature along with 2 other partners from this firm." Sarah finally took her copy of the document, her eyes finding the relevant passage. Her breath caught in her throat. "To my daughter, Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell, I leave the sum of $35 million, to be distributed as follows. Controlling interest in Mitchell Construction, all real estate holdings except the Park Avenue apartment, and the entirety of my investment portfolio. To my son, Derek Richard Mitchell, I leave the sum of $1 million and the Park Avenue apartment with the provision that he may not sell, lease, or otherwise transfer ownership of said property for a period of 10 years. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat, could feel Derek's rage radiating from him like heat from a forge. When he finally spoke, his voice was dangerously quiet. "He can't do this. I'll contest it. Mental incompetence, undue influence, something." "Your father anticipated that," Brennan said calmly. "He underwent a comprehensive psychiatric evaluation 3 days before signing this will. He also included a video testimony explaining his decisions. Would you like me to play it?" Derek's fist slammed onto the desk, making everyone jump. "That sanctimonious bastard. 20 years I gave to that company. 20 years of kissing his ass, of doing everything he wanted, of being the perfect son who embezzled $3 million from the pension fund," Sarah said quietly. Both men turned to stare at her. It was the first time she'd spoken since Derek arrived. "What did you say?" Derek's voice was ice. Sarah met his gaze steadily. "Dad knew Derek. He told me 6 months ago, right before he changed the will. He knew about the pension fund, about the kickbacks from the Riverside project, about the safety violations you covered up that led to Miguel Vasquez losing his leg. You lying little—" "He had evidence," Sarah continued, her voice growing stronger. "Emails, financial records, even recordings of you discussing it with your buddy Tom from accounting. Dad kept it all in a safety deposit box. He showed it to me the day he was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. Derek's face had gone from red to purple. And you didn't tell me? You knew he was planning this and you didn't warn me? Warn you? Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in it. The way you warned me when you told Dad I was the one who crashed his Bentley? The way you warned me when you convinced him I had a drug problem in college when really it was you snorting half of Columbia? The way you warned me every single time you threw me under the bus to save your own skin? Ms. Mitchell, Brennan interjected, perhaps we should— No, Sarah said firmly. We're going to finish this today. All of it. She reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope thick with documents. Her hands were steady now, steadier than they'd been in years. This was the moment she'd been preparing for, the moment her father had prepared her for in those final months. Derek, before you storm out of here planning your legal challenge, you should know something. Dad didn't just leave me the money. He left me instructions. Very specific instructions about what to do if you contested the will. Derek's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? Sarah opened the envelope and withdrew a single sheet of paper. This is a letter from the district attorney's office. They're very interested in the evidence Dad compiled about your creative accounting. But Dad made a deal with them. As long as you accept the will and walk away quietly, this investigation stays sealed. Contest it, and I'm instructed to deliver everything to the DA within 24 hours. The color drained from Derek's face entirely. You wouldn't. I'm your brother. My brother? Sarah stood, gathering her documents. My brother died the day he let Mom think I was stealing from her to buy drugs, when really, you were the one taking her jewelry to pay off your gambling debts. My brother died the day he stood by and watched Dad scream at me for embarrassing the family, when you were the one who got arrested for drunk driving and used my name when they booked you. She turned to Brennan. Mr. Brennan, I'll need you to arrange the transfer of assets as soon as possible. I have a lot of work to do. Of course, Ms. Mitchell. We can begin the paperwork immediately. Derek stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. This isn't over, Sarah. You can't just— Yes, I can, Sarah said simply. And I will. You have the apartment, Derek. $1 million. That's more than most people see in a lifetime. Be grateful. Grateful? Derek laughed bitterly. For table scraps? For being cut out of what's rightfully mine? Rightfully yours? Sarah's voice rose for the first time. You think you earned it? By showing up to work whenever you felt like it? By treating the employees like servants? By spending more time on the golf course than in the office? Dad built that company with his bare hands while you were still in diapers. I was the one who sat with him during chemo. I was the one who held his hand when he was scared. I was the one who listened when he cried about what you'd become. Derek pulled out his phone, his fingers flying over the screen. I'm calling my lawyer. This is— Derek. Sarah's voice cut through his protest like a blade. Look at me. Something in her tone made him stop. For the first time in years, really look at his sister. Gone was the quiet girl who'd always stepped aside, who'd always let him take the spotlight, who'd always cleaned up his messes without complaint. In her place stood a woman who'd spent 6 months preparing for this moment, who'd watched their father die with regrets that ate at him worse than the cancer. I'm giving you one chance, she said. One. Take the $1 million, take the apartment, and disappear. Start over somewhere. Maybe without Dad's money and influence, you'll finally become the man he always hoped you'd be. But if you fight this, if you try to drag Dad's name through the mud, if you come after what he left me, I will bury you. Not because I hate you, but because I loved him, and because I promised. The office fell silent, except for the rain against the windows. Derek's phone remained frozen in his hand, his lawyer's number undialed. Brennan sat perfectly still, years of experience telling him when to become invisible. Finally, Derek spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. I was his son, his only son. No, Sarah said sadly. You were his biggest disappointment. And that's what killed him, Derek. Not the cancer. The knowledge that his son, his heir, the one he'd given everything to, had become everything he despised. Derek's face crumbled then, the mask finally slipping. For a moment, Sarah saw the brother she'd once had, the one who'd taught her to ride a bike, who'd snuck her candy when their parents weren't looking. But the moment passed, and his features hardened again. Fine, he spat. Take it all. But don't come crying to me when you realize you're in over your head. Running a company isn't like your little social work job. You'll fail within a year. Maybe, Sarah admitted, but at least I'll fail honestly. Derek stormed out without another word, slamming the door behind him with enough force to rattle the windows. Sarah sank back into her chair, suddenly exhausted. The weight of what had just happened, what was about to happen, settled on her shoulders like a lead blanket. Ms. Mitchell? Brennan said gently. Are you all right? Sarah nodded, then shook her head, then laughed. A real laugh this time. I don't know. I've been preparing for this for 6 months, and I still don't know if I'm ready. Your father believed you were, Brennan said, pulling out another envelope. He left this for you, with instructions to give it to you only after the will was read. Sarah took the envelope with trembling fingers. Her name was written across the front in her father's shaky handwriting. She opened it carefully, as if it might disappear if she moved too quickly. My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this, then you've just done the hardest thing I ever asked of you. You've stood up to your brother, and you've claimed what I should have given you long ago. Not just the money or the company, but the recognition you deserved. I know you never wanted my wealth. I know you would have been happy with just my love and approval. The tragedy of my life is that I gave both so freely to the child who deserved them least, while withholding them from the one who deserved them most. Derek came to me last month with a business proposition. He wanted to buy out your future inheritance for a fraction of its worth. He actually pulled out this gaudy watch, probably fake, knowing him, and tried to convince me it was worth $50,000. Said he'd throw it in to sweeten the deal. That's when I knew I had to act. My son trying to con his dying father out of his sister's inheritance with a cheap watch. But you, Sarah, you came to me with your will, your actual will, leaving me the little you had because you wanted to make sure Mom's medical bills were covered after you were gone. You thought you were dying, and your first thought was of others. That's when I knew I'd been blind for too long. The company is yours now. The money is yours. But more than that, the chance to do with them what I never could. Something good. Something that matters. I know you'll take care of the employees. I know you'll honor the Mitchell name in ways Derek never could. I'm sorry it took me so long to see you. Really see you. I'm sorry for every time I chose him over you. I'm sorry for every accomplishment I ignored, every sacrifice I didn't acknowledge. But I'm not sorry for this. This is my chance to finally do right by you. Don't let Derek or anyone else make you doubt yourself. You are my daughter, my true heir, and I am so proud of who you've become despite my failures as a father. All my love, Dad. P.S. If Derek actually tries to contest the will, there's a safety deposit box at Chase Manhattan, branch 0847, box 331. The key is with Brennan. Everything you need is there. I'm sorry you might have to use it, but I trust you to do what's right. Sarah read the letter 3 times before the tears came. Not the bitter tears she'd cried so many times over the years, but something else. Something that felt like release, like forgiveness, like a weight she didn't know she'd been carrying finally lifting from her chest. Take your time, Brennan said softly, sliding a box of tissues across the desk. Sarah wiped her eyes, carefully folding the letter and placing it back in the envelope. No, I'm okay. We have work to do. Ms. Mitchell, if I may, Brennan ventured. I've been your father's attorney for 15 years. I've seen him build an empire, make and break fortunes, but I've never seen him as certain about anything as he was about this decision. He said you were the only one who ever saw the company as more than a source of wealth. You saw it as a responsibility. Sarah nodded, thinking of all the times she'd visited construction sites with her father as a child, how he'd known every worker's name, asked about their families, before Derek had convinced him that distance meant respect. That kindness was weakness. Mr. Brennan, I need you to set up a meeting with the board of directors as soon as possible, and I'll need a complete audit of the company's finances, especially the pension fund. Whatever Derek took, we're going to make it right. Of course, anything else? Sarah stood, smoothing down her simple black dress. She'd worn it to the funeral, and it seemed fitting to wear it now, at this second goodbye. Yes, I need you to find Miguel Vasquez, the worker who lost his leg. I want to know how he's doing, what he needs, and any other workers who were hurt because of cut corners or covered-up violations. We're going to make that right, too. Brennan made notes, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Your father said you'd say that. He's already set aside a fund for exactly that purpose. $10 million, earmarked for employee restitution and support. Of course he did, Sarah murmured. Even from beyond the grave, Richard Mitchell was still surprising her. As she prepared to leave, Brennan stood and extended his hand. Ms. Mitchell, I look forward to working with you. I think Mitchell Construction is in very good hands. Sarah shook his hand firmly, the same way her father had taught her all those years ago. Thank you, Mr. Brennan. But I should warn you, things are going to be different. Very different. I'm counting on it, he replied. Sarah left the office building and stepped out into the November rain. The city stretched before her, lights blinking through the darkness, full of possibility and danger in equal measure. She thought about Derek, probably drowning his rage in whiskey at some overpriced bar, surrounding himself with people who would tell him what he wanted to hear. She felt a pang of sympathy for him, but it was distant, like an echo of an old wound. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You'll regret this. D." She deleted it without responding and hailed a cab. Tomorrow she'd face the board, the employees, the weight of her father's empire. Tomorrow she'd begin the work of undoing years of damage, of rebuilding not just a company but a legacy. But tonight she'd go home to her small apartment in Queens, order Chinese food from the place that knew her order by heart, and read her father's letter one more time. She'd call her best friend Emma and tell her everything. She'd probably cry again, but they'd be good tears this time. The cab pulled up and Sarah climbed in, giving the driver her address. As they pulled away from the curb, she caught a glimpse of herself in the rearview mirror. Same face, same features, but something had changed. The girl who'd walked into that office was gone. In her place sat Sarah Mitchell, CEO of Mitchell Construction, keeper of secrets, protector of promises. Her father had tried to buy her brother's loyalty with money and power, and it had corrupted him. Derek had tried to buy her inheritance with a cheap watch and cheaper lies. But Sarah? Sarah had purchased her father's redemption with something far more valuable: 20 years of quiet love, unrecognized sacrifice, and the strength to forgive. The rain continued to fall as the cab wound through the streets of Manhattan, washing the city clean for another day. And Sarah Mitchell rode through it all. No longer the forgotten daughter, but the unlikely heir to an empire built on sand and saved by truth. As the city lights blurred past the rain-streaked windows, Sarah pulled out her phone and opened her contacts. There was one call she needed to make before the night was through. She scrolled to a name she hadn't dialed in years: Martha Vasquez, Miguel's wife. The conversation would be difficult, full of apologies that weren't hers to make but hers to deliver nonetheless. But that was what leaders did. They faced the hard truths, had the difficult conversations, made the amends that others wouldn't. Her father had taught her that, not through his successes but through his failures. The phone rang once, twice, then a cautious voice. "Hello? Mrs. Vasquez? This is Sarah Mitchell, Richard Mitchell's daughter. I know it's late, but I was wondering if we could talk." And so it began. Not with grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but with a single phone call on a rainy November night. The rebuild of an empire. One conversation, one relationship, one right decision at a time. The meter in the cab ticked steadily upward, marking the distance between who she'd been and who she was becoming. And Sarah Mitchell, unlikely heir, reluctant warrior, favorite daughter at last, rode on through the darkness toward whatever dawn awaited. The Mitchell Construction headquarters stood like a glass and steel monument to ambition in Lower Manhattan, 32 floors of gleaming modernity that caught the morning sun like a beacon. Sarah stood across the street, looking up at what was now hers, trying to reconcile the building with her memories of visiting her father here as a child. When it had been just 5 floors in a converted warehouse in Queens, her phone buzzed. Emma's voice came through clear and supportive. "You've got this, Sarah, remember. You're not the same girl who used to hide in the supply closet during board meetings." "No," Sarah agreed. "Now I'm the woman who owns the supply closet." She'd dressed carefully that morning, not in the designer suits Derek favored, but in a simple navy dress and blazer that felt like armor. Her mother's pearl necklace sat warm against her throat, a reminder of grace under pressure. The lobby security guard did a double-take when she entered. "Ms. Mitchell? Sarah Mitchell? Good morning, Thomas." She'd made a point of learning the staff names years ago, during her occasional visits. "How's your daughter? Still at Columbia?" Thomas's weathered face broke into a surprised smile. "Yes, ma'am, pre-med, she's doing real well. I heard about your father. I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you. He spoke highly of you. Said you've been here since the beginning. 23 years next month." Thomas hesitated, then added quietly, "It's good to see you here, Ms. Mitchell. Real good." The elevator ride to the executive floor felt endless. Sarah had been here exactly 3 times in the past 5 years. Once for her father's 70th birthday party, once when her mother had surprised him for their anniversary, and once to beg him to look into Derek's activities. That last visit had ended with her father throwing her out, Derek smirking from behind his massive desk. Now that desk would be hers. The elevator doors opened to reveal organized chaos. The executive floor was buzzing with activity, assistants running between offices, phones ringing incessantly. At the center of it all stood Margaret Chen, her father's executive assistant for the past 15 years, trying to direct traffic with the efficiency of an air traffic controller. "Margaret," Sarah called out. The older woman turned, relief flooding her features. "Thank God you're here. It's been absolute madness since word got out about the will. Half the board is in the conference room, Derek's been calling nonstop, and there are reporters downstairs." "Reporters?" "Someone leaked the story. Construction heiress inherits empire while golden boy gets snubbed is trending on social media. Sarah closed her eyes briefly. Of course, Derek would try to win in the court of public opinion if he couldn't win in actual court. All right. First things first. No comment to any media. Route all press inquiries to legal. Where's the board? Conference room A. They've been waiting for an hour. Let them wait another 10 minutes. I need to see my father's office first. Margaret's expression softened. Of course. It's exactly as he left it. The CEO's office was a shrine to success. Awards, photos with dignitaries, architectural models of major projects. But Sarah's eyes went to the small things. The coffee mug she'd made him in 3rd grade still holding pens. The photo of their family from before everything went wrong hidden behind newer pictures. The worn copy of The Art of War he'd read until the pages were soft. On his desk was a folder marked, "For Sarah. Open immediately." Inside, she found detailed files on every board member, every major contract, every skeleton in the company closet. Her father had spent his last months preparing her for this moment. A sticky note on top read, "Trust Margaret. Fire Harrison first. Watch Chen. The real books are in the safe. Dad." Sarah smiled despite herself. Even from beyond the grave, Richard Mitchell was still the strategist. A knock interrupted her thoughts. Margaret peered in. They're getting restless. Harrison is making noises about an emergency vote to appoint an interim CEO. Of course he is. Sarah straightened, tucking the folder under her arm. How do I look? Like your father's daughter, Margaret said simply. He'd be proud. Sarah doubted that was entirely true, but she appreciated the sentiment. Let's go face the wolves. The conference room held 12 people, 9 board members, the CFO, the head of legal, and Derek's closest ally on the board, James Harrison. The conversation died as Sarah entered. Gentlemen, she said, taking her place at the head of the table. And Ms. Foster, thank you for coming on such short notice. Harrison didn't waste time. Ms. Mitchell, while we all respect your loss, surely you can see the impossibility of this situation. You have no experience running a company of this magnitude. Your background is in social work, for God's sake. You're absolutely right, Sarah agreed, surprising him. I've spent the last 10 years working with families in crisis, managing budgets that would barely cover your lunch expenses, and trying to fix problems with resources that wouldn't pay for one of your golf club memberships. She opened her father's folder, pulling out a specific document. Which is why I find it so interesting that Mitchell Construction has been hemorrhaging money for the past 3 years, while somehow, miraculously, executive bonuses have increased by 300%. The room went still. That's a serious accusation, said Chen, the CFO, his face carefully neutral. It's not an accusation, Mr. Chen. It's a fact. I have the real books. The ones my father kept himself when he realized the official numbers weren't adding up. She slid copies across the table. The Riverside project that was supposed to cost $12 million? Final cost, $23 million. The Harbor Point development? Budgeted at $30 million. Actual cost, $48 million. Should I continue? Harrison's face had gone red. Those overruns were due to unforeseen circumstances, like the kickbacks to city inspectors, the substandard materials that had to be replaced when they failed inspection, the safety violations that were covered up until someone lost a leg. Sarah's voice remained calm, but her eyes were steel. Yes, I'd say those were quite unforeseen, at least by my father, who trusted you to run his company with integrity. You can't prove any of that, Harrison blustered. Sarah pulled out her phone and set it on the table. Would you like to hear the recording of you discussing the Riverside kickbacks with my brother? My father was old, Mr. Harrison, not stupid. He recorded every meeting for the last year of his life. The color drained from Harrison's face. Now, Sarah continued, I'm going to give you the same choice I gave Derek. Resign. Today, quietly. Clear out your office and leave with whatever dignity you have left. Or stay and fight, and I'll turn everything over to the authorities. This is blackmail, Harrison hissed. No, Sarah corrected. Blackmail would be if I threatened to expose your affair with Judge Morrison's wife unless you voted my way on the zoning committee. Which, by the way, my father also knew about. Harrison stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. You're making a mistake. This company will collapse without me. Then it deserves to collapse, Sarah said simply. But I don't think it will. Security is waiting outside to escort you to your office. You have 1 hour to pack your personal belongings. After Harrison stormed out, the remaining board members sat in stunned silence. Sarah studied each face, matching them to her father's notes. Who could be trusted? Who was compromised? Who was simply weak? I know what you're all thinking, she said finally. The social worker is going to destroy everything Richard Mitchell built. She's going to come in here with her bleeding heart and her naive ideals and run this company into the ground. Several board members had the grace to look uncomfortable. You're half right, Sarah continued. I am going to destroy something. I'm going to destroy the culture of corruption that's been eating this company alive. I'm going to destroy the network of kickbacks and bribes that's made us a laughingstock in legitimate circles. I'm going to destroy the system that values profit over people, that cuts corners on safety to boost quarterly earnings. She stood, placing her hands flat on the table. But what I build in its place will be something my father would have been proud of. The company he started, not the one it became. We're going to honor our contracts, pay our workers fairly, and build things that last. We're going to be the company that others aspire to work with, not the one they deal with because they have to. That's a beautiful speech, said Foster, the only woman on the board besides Sarah. But idealism doesn't pay the bills. We have shareholders to think about. Actually, Chen spoke up unexpectedly, the majority shareholder is now Ms. Mitchell. She controls 51% of the company. Sarah studied Chen carefully. Her father's note had said to watch him, not fire him. Interesting. Mr. Chen, I'd like a complete audit of all projects, all finances, going back 5 years. Can you handle that? That's a massive undertaking, Chen said carefully. Yes, it is. And I'm sure you'll find some very interesting things. Things that might make a lesser CFO nervous, but I've heard you're not a lesser CFO. I've heard you've been keeping your own set of books, just like my father, that you've been documenting the discrepancies, but were too afraid of Derek and Harrison to act. Chen's poker face finally cracked. How did you... My father noticed that you started backing up everything to a private server 3 years ago. Right around the time the first major overrun started. He thought you were stealing. I think you were protecting yourself. The room held its breath. Finally, Chen nodded slowly. I have everything. Every transaction, every irregularity, every diverted fund. I was waiting for your father to act, but he was already sick by the time I had enough proof. Then you'll help me clean house? With pleasure, Ms. Mitchell. Sarah felt the tide turning. One by one, the board members who'd been sitting on the fence began to lean forward, engaged. These were people who'd built careers in construction, who remembered when Mitchell meant quality, not corruption. I need to be clear about something, Sarah said. Change isn't optional. Anyone who stays does so with the understanding that things will be different, radically different. We're going to lose some clients who were only with us because of our willingness to bend rules. We're going to have quarters where profits dip while we make things right. If you can't handle that, I need your resignation by end of business today. 2 more board members exchanged glances. 1, Douglas Reeves cleared his throat. Ms. Mitchell, I've been on this board for 12 years. I watched your father build this company, and I watched your brother try to destroy it. If you're serious about returning to what we used to be, you have my support. And mine, added Foster. Though I want it on record that I expect you to prove yourself. Good intentions aren't enough. Fair enough, Sarah agreed. Which brings me to my first initiative. Mr. Chen, how much did Derek siphon from the employee pension fund? $3,200,000, Chen said without hesitation.